So I said to him, why don't you drive one car and I'll take the other vehicle and we'll drive out of Guatemala. He said, no, they are not going to run me off.
And at that time, one of the Carmelite sisters, Sister Erlinda, came in. She said she wanted to talk to me. And I said, well, I'll be finished with this meeting and then we'll visit. No, she said, right now. And I was pretty shocked. And she said, they killed Stan last night. Oh, my God.
Stanley was born in 1935 in the small town of Okarche, Oklahoma, not far from Oklahoma City.
Like me, he lived on the farm, and he was sort of a quiet guy, but worked very hard at the farm and helped with that. And he was active in some of the sports in high school. And
as a young man, Rother expressed interest in becoming a priest.
All of a sudden, during the summer months, he mentioned to his dad, well, I think maybe I'd like to go to the seminary. And it was a shock to his dad, and his dad says, well, why didn't you take Latin in school instead of spending your time with FFA, which is Future Farmers of America organization, which leads into being active in the farming profession. And he ended up being the president of our FFA chapter in our community here.
And after high school, his parents sent him to San Antonio, Texas, to study for the priesthood.
But he really struggled going through the seminary, like with Latin and things. I took Latin, and he took VOAG, vocational agriculture. I become the farmer, and he goes to be a priest.
And when he got to be a priest, you know, they put him in some of the small parishes and stuff like that until all of a sudden, I think that it developed that he was able to get an opening in Guatemala. And since he had such an extensive, and he liked the simple life so well in that, that was a real good fit for him.
And because he was an Oklahoma farm boy, there was an opportunity to have a good relationship because of my living in the rural area of Guatemala.
In 1968, Rother arrived at the town of Santiago Atitlan, located in Guatemala's Central Highlands, where most of its people are indigenous Sutujil Mayans. The people of Santiago did not have a translation for the name Stanley, so he was addressed as Francisco in Spanish and in Sutujil as Apla.
That was an honor imposed upon him by the people. When they put his name into Sutujil and used it commonly, that was an indication of great respect.
Speaking Sutujil and Spanish, Rother was able to understand their traditions like no other foreigner had done before, earning him the trust of the town. He saw the impoverished conditions of the community and was determined to take action. He worked in programs aimed at helping the community achieve basic education, good health, and overall progress for the people.
He had several projects, and they were very successful projects. Had a project in which he had food for the children. They had a clinic where they saw to the basic needs of the health of people, gave out medications that they were able to give out, that we carried down with us as missionaries when we went. Our baggage was always full of stuff that we took for the people there to use in the clinic.
There was a hospital that was built before his coming. They had a local doctor that would come, and then they had visiting doctors who would care for the people there.
During his time in Guatemala, Santiago's child mortality rate dropped by more than half.
And for that hospital, they dug a well, a water well, and something was wrong at the bottom of the well. Well, one of the natives went down to fix it, and there was gas there, and he passed out, and he was down there. Stan Rother went down, picked him up, and was hoisted out with him so that they were both saved.
He was just that type of person, you know. He wanted to help the poor. He always was that way. He didn't care about all the finer things of life and all that, you know. He just, common old boy.
Stan would raise some funds for building small block houses with the people. College kids and friends would come down from the States and work with him on the building the houses. Not a real vast program, but one that was very helpful and much appreciated by the people.
Ayudar a toda la gente de la comunidad, a la gente a las mujeres viudas, pobres que no tienen ningún trabajo, él la consiguió. Y no solo pasó conmigo, sino a toda la gente de Titlán, él los ayudó bastante, en diferentes ayudas y en diferentes formas. Unos enseñaba a leer y escribir, y ellos mismos también, los mismos padres, fundaron una radio, La Voz de Atitlán. Y desde ese entonces se vino la radio que ahora está.
Rother worked with the only radio station at the time to broadcast over-the-air literacy programs that would reach all of Santiago and the small villages around it.
The radio apparently had a human rights message. It was in Zutihil, the Mayan language, so the intelligence services or the military couldn't tell exactly what was being said, but they suspected it was revolutionary, and they knew the church had started the radio. They knew Father Rother was part of that. Also, when the people were disappeared, kidnapped, or didn't return from their fields, Father Rother took care of their families and also went looking for the bodies or see what happened to them.
Oppressive military governments and unjust living conditions for people in rural areas started to upset the people of Guatemala. Like many Latin American countries, it has faced hard times through internal conflict involving military forces, right and left-wing guerrillas, and innocents caught in between.
A lo largo de toda su historia, los presidentes no han respetado las instituciones democráticas y esto hace de que la democracia y la participación en la historia guatemalteca no tengan un peso, no sean reconocidas. A cualquier persona que tenga ideas, bueno, pueden ser comunistas o ideas progresistas o ideas de igualdad o de libertad, son señalados como comunistas y prácticamente por eso pues, son privados de sus derechos, algunos son perseguidos y posteriormente en los años 60 pues empiezan a existir algunos movimientos para tratar de recuperar ciertos derechos, tratar de recuperar ciertas instituciones. Durante el conflicto armado interno se dieron elecciones. El general Lucas García llega a mediados de los años 70 en unas elecciones que ya se han reconocido que fueron fraudulentas. Sus esfuerzos siguen enfocados en contrarrestar los movimientos guerrilleros que ya para los años 70 estaban muy bien identificados en todo el territorio guatemalteco. No hace ningún esfuerzo de buscar una conciliación, es más, él está planteado en vencer esa guerra interna que se tenía, y a partir de ahí es que él enfoca su política.
The Lucas administration was not just violent, it poorly managed its violence. So it actually created more pressure and more opposition. If you think of what's underneath the pressure cooker that's Guatemala, that's heating it up, I think there's repression itself creates more opposition. You have inequity, the fact that so many people live without what they need while others live in opulence. In Guatemala, it was a military dictatorship, and everywhere you went, there was military, there were jeeps, there were people pointing machine guns at you. You felt like you were under siege.
La guerrilla se manejaba dentro de las selvas y dentro de las montañas de Guatemala. Se alimentaba o conseguía medicinas y comida a partir de poblados de campesinos que estaban dispersos dentro de las montañas guatemaltecas. Entonces, la idea del ejército era que llegara el ejército a estas comunidades, las desapareciera, y a partir de ahí la guerrilla no iba a tener quién les iba a dar alimento, dónde iban a conseguir medicinas, etc.
On October 21st, 1980, government troops arrived in Santiago Atitlan to hunt down anyone suspected of being involved in guerrilla factions or in communist activities.
Siempre estuvieron como 10 años aquí en el pueblo, pero ellos dijeron que, ¿cómo se llama?, cuidar del pueblo, pero no fue así, sino que fue terrible porque mucha gente lo mataron.
¿Quién no lo va a recordar? Eso era algo terrible, doloroso. Empezaron a catear las casas, a meterse a las casas, a violar a las mujeres. Amarraban a los maridos mientras que ellos hacían de las suyas con las mujeres y las hijas. Hicieron barbaridades.
The director of La Voz de Atitlan radio was kidnapped, tortured, and killed soon after a broadcast commenting on President Jimmy Carter and human rights policies of the United States.
Y después del secuestro del compañero, lo sacudieron toda la casa de la radio, llevaron un montón de documentos y los aparatos de nuestra radio. Entonces nos acusaron de que nosotros éramos subversivos. Entonces ellos comenzaron a decirnos que nosotros estamos metiendo en la cabeza a la gente de otras políticas tal, que nuestro pecado que nosotros hicimos es de que trabajar en desarrollo, llevando la alfabetización en todos los municipios.
Muchas personas del movimiento indígena son señaladas como guerrilleros, como comunistas, y ellos no estaban pregonando, ni exigiendo, ni divulgando ideas comunistas. Estaban pidiendo mejor trato para sus comunidades.
Diego Kik, Rother's catechist, was kidnapped soon after he called the police to protect the people from kidnappers.
I know that they were pulling him away, and Stan wanted to help, and then he was just told to stay away, and arms were used to keep him away. And that was extremely difficult for Stan because Diego was a friend of his, very good catechist, working with him, and Stan had no indication, no reason to believe he had been involved with the guerrilla movement, and that is as much as Stan knew, and he would speak of that. But he did try to dissuade the military, pleaded with them to let him go, and offered to, I'll watch it and everything else, but they wouldn't do it. And there was a violent way of grabbing the guy and taking him off.
When someone would disappear, as they did, they would disappear and later they would find them in a creek bed or a river bed or by the side of the road, dead of course, and they would come to him and he would load them in the pickup with a box and go out and bring them back.
He would see to it that people that had to leave the community because of threats or because of a parent being pursued, he'd help them go elsewhere.
The town also pretty much shut down at dark. People were afraid to go out at night or weren't allowed to go out at night. So it's pretty kind of depressing, kind of oppressive atmosphere.
Dio lugar a la gente porque la gente nunca ha visto un arma. Entonces como los soldados andan en las calles con armas y empezaron a matar gente y entrar en casas. Entonces la gente se asustaron, entonces fueron a dormir a la iglesia.
Se daban cuenta de las necesidades que había y a partir de ahí iniciaban acciones tanto de evangelización, pero a la par acciones de ir promoviendo un desarrollo social, de mejorar las condiciones de vida de las personas presentes en la comunidad. Obviamente la organización social era un factor o un elemento necesario para que estas comunidades se fueran desarrollando. Y al momento de identificar que líderes religiosos estimulaban o motivaban la organización, empezaron a ser señalados como guerrilleros, comunistas. Están promoviendo la organización de los indígenas, y eso es comunismo. Entonces, a partir de ahí empieza también como un ataque a ciertos líderes religiosos.
The army would think of young Americans as potential leftists, possible supporters of the guerrillas.
In fact, one of the reasons he was suspect was they asked for a translator when the army had a meeting with the people, and Father Rother was the translator. And the army soldiers couldn't believe, the officers couldn't believe that the people were saying the things they were saying. So they thought Father Rother was putting words.
In those years, there's a grapevine. Obviously, in situations like that, in any part of the world, there's going to be a grapevine for moving information around. And there was amongst us priests. And it was through this communique that Pat was able to come over and tell us, hey, Stan is on a short list, we've got to get him out. And I went over with that express purpose. And I got there and Stan was not there. He was in Guatemala City. So I got Father Pedro Bosel, who was the Guatemalan priest that was with him, and got him in the car hidden, and then we got him out, came through the military checkpoints, and then got him into the city and out and stopped Stan as he was coming into San Lucas, which was the one road to Santiago, and turned him around and got back into the city to get him out of the country. We promised to let him know as soon as his name came off the list. Then he agreed to go up to the States, and that's how that happened.
He wouldn't have come home if his life wouldn't have been at stake. So he'd come home at night and just stare out at the western skies, wanting to go back. And finally he told him, he says, I'm going back. He says, I can't leave my people like that.
And he knew the risk of doing it, but yet he knew that his life would never be the same if he didn't go down there and stay with his people. And so he took that risk.
In April 1981, he would return to Santiago. On July 28th, 3 masked men broke into the mission.
They were wearing face masks and ski masks, and they asked this young fellow to tell the priest that there's a sick call. And he said, I'm not going to do that. And I said, you better tell us where he is. And knowing it was 1 o'clock in the morning, Stan figured there was something up. So he put his trousers on over his pajamas and opened the door. And then they rushed him, and he fought. You could see by the bruises on his knuckles. But there were 3, and he was pretty well bruised up and then shot. Once here and once to his head.
Why was he killed? Because he was trying to make life better for those people whom the government or whoever it is, whoever that death squad worked for, did not want their condition better. $2 a day was enough for them to make and to live on.
Y él no está de acuerdo por la injusticia y todo eso. Y solo pasó con los gentes indígenas. Hay reclutamiento forzoso para la gente indígena, para la gente pobre. Ahora los que tienen y los ladinos, tranquilo. Entonces él vio por qué existe ese modo, por qué. Alegó bastante y ayudó a la gente más en eso. Por eso lo quebraron.
The person who was an eyewitness to Stan's murder, that would have been Francisco Bosel. Well, since that fellow was so close to the incident, we knew we had to get him out of the country. It's one way or another, or certainly out of that area. And so a move was made to move him to a different part of the country and to hide him. Well, somehow or another, he was found out by a television news reporter. And we got a car, unmarked and unidentifiable car, went up to an area in the northwestern part of the country called Coban, where he was hiding in a Benedictine monastery. And then a van took him into Honduras. And we made arrangements to get a particular corner in Tegucigalpa. And then I was to go in by airplane. And according to my flight schedule, they would come to a particular corner that I could get to at a particular time. The following day, when we were promised a political visa for him at the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa, and then I was to take him up to Dallas, and members of some person from the Diocese of Oklahoma City was going to met us there and then took him up and got him a place to stay and a job. He's still in the U.S. He married a Mexican girl and has a family there now. In the Mayan way of thinking, you know, there does exist afterlife, so they wanted to have some realization of that.
In the autopsy that took place, they kept his heart. And there were several mayonnaise jars of blood that the nuns had sopped up off the floors.
So in the course of the time I was there, we decided to make a shrine with the blood and the heart. So
10 years after that, when it came time to do the moving, of course, we had to take that casket out, and it had to be opened so that it would see that everything was intact. And it wasn't open there on the altar. We saw very clearly that the blood had not coagulated. And of course, that blew my mind.
They said the blood and the heart looked the same, which really was an amazing set of facts for me.
$14,000 Oklahomans signed a petition asking President Reagan for a thorough investigation of the murder. The file vanished from public view within a few weeks.
Oh, we did. When he got ready to go back, I said, why do you want to go back if you know if your name is on the list, they're going to try to kill you. He says, well, a shepherd cannot run. from his flock, you know. So that's what he left with, and